Today on Zestology, the scientific breakthrough in anti-aging and longevity. The idea is you age youthfully and you look great and feel great along the way. It really works. We're talking today about, yes, Spermidine.
Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality, and motivation.
Welcome back to Zestology. I'm Tony Wrighton. I'm in my office in West London, and there are no meeting rooms free, nowhere to record this podcast apart from a windowless room with a printer in it. So if someone comes in and starts printing something out, you'll know. Today's podcast I've really been looking forward to releasing because I recorded it a few weeks ago, and it's all about the miracle anti-aging compound that you might have heard me talking about, and that is Spermidine. And I've been partnering up with spermidineLIFE over the last few weeks. And the first time I heard about Spermidine was with Dr. David Sinclair on this podcast a few years ago. And you've probably heard that podcast. I'm sure you've heard of him. He is one of the world's foremost anti-aging experts, and he's on the board of spermidineLIFE as well. And he talked about this compound that can transform your cellular health, cardiovascular function, improve memory, immune function, sleep, definitely skin, hair and nails as well, and all by enhancing autophagy. Amazing process. So you can do this by going through a pretty hardcore 5-day fast, or you can take Spermidine. I have a lot of questions about Spermidine, which is why I wanted to record this podcast today for you with Don Moxley, who is not only an expert on Spermidine, but has a fascinating history as well, because he's trained top-level athletes. He's been at the forefront of physical excellence, and he's actually sort of a very good wrestler, or he was very big in the wrestling world himself. So wanted to talk to Don about his history, about Spermidine, and whether it's all it's cracked up to be. Because I think one of the things about this podcast is we love biohacking, we love trying new stuff, we love experimenting, but sorting the good stuff from the not so good is very important, and getting the right facts. And as a journalist, I consider it my duty to get the facts to you as much as possible. So here is Don Moxley on Zestology. Don, how you doing?
I am great this morning, Tony. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thanks. Yeah, I don't know whether we should start on Spermidine or your incredible life, which you've created. Let's start with your life, because it is really amazing. Just tell people where you are right now, because it's totally ties into the theme of this podcast.
Well, I am currently, my wife and I, my wife of 33 years, and our daughter has grown up. She finished her college work at Ohio State and then grad school during COVID, and she moved out of our house January 2nd. We had the house sold by January 21st, and we moved into a 43-foot fifth wheel trailer that we have started a journey on. And so right now I'm coming to you from my office in the trailer. And we are parked out in Anacortes, Washington. So it's out in the place, and we are out looking for our next home. We, there's great mountain ranges around here, but we have just spent the last few months coming through the Rockies, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, the great mountain states, and we have family in this area. But we are living very mobile. And as we say, we're letting our next home find us.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, we want we want to wake up and drink coffee looking at mountains and beautiful things.
Oh, wow. And look, you're living in a certain amount of comfort, because I can see a Juve light or some sort of red light over one shoulder and a sauna over the other shoulder. So that's pretty cool.
We, when we made the decision to do this, we said, okay, it's got to fit our lifestyle. So we found a rig that we can put. I added sauna to my life about 6 years ago, and it's a no-brainer for me anymore. So out in our rig, we took the dinette out, and we've got a Peloton bike there. Oh, yeah. I've got a Concept 2 ski ergometer that hooks to the side of the rig. We've got kettlebells and maces and some rubber band systems. I don't have barbells. I've got kettlebells and maces and rubber band systems for strength. So yeah, we needed something that would support the lifestyle, and we were able to put it together.
What's it like driving it around?
Listen, when you've got 16,000 pounds sitting on your tail going down a mountain pass, it's a bit nervy. Yeah. But what was really cool was we spent the week down in Beverly Hills last week in Los Angeles at the Dave Asprey Biohacking Conference. And this is the first time we've been away from the rig for an extended time. And the cool thing is, it felt like home when we got home. We got home, we pushed out, we got the dog back from the dog hotel, and it feels like home. And that's pretty cool.
That's great. That's great. And you're using Starlink as well, which is Elon Musk's extraordinary Wi-Fi solution. So it's all, I mean, you've cut out a couple of times a little bit just so people know if it's sort of a little bit flaky, but that's pretty cool.
Yes, Starlink's been good. So to stay connected, I use a combination of, I have a T-Mobile hotspot that works great. But when it doesn't work at all. So
Hello. Yeah, you just cut out a bit there. Yeah.
So what's the last thing you heard?
Oh, when it works, when the T-Mobile works, it's great. But when it doesn't, it doesn't.
when the T-Mobile works, it's great. But when it doesn't, there's nothing there. There's no middle ground. So I'm able to use the Starlink to connect. That from time to time there's a dropout. So obviously the satellites are moving and they drop in and out. So we've got the Starlink and it works great when the T-Mobile doesn't.
Yeah. Wow. You are living the dream. That's fantastic. Really good. Okay, well, listen, you are obviously someone who is aligned very much with the sort of biohacking lifestyle, to doing things a little bit unconventionally. And I've been very excited to meet all of you at spermidineLIFE and talk more about Spermidine. Just explain this extraordinarily titled supplement.
Albeit the craziest name in the world to go to market with. Spermidine is a molecule we've known about for hundreds of years. The guy who invented the microscope, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, wound up with his semen on a dish, looking at it through the microscope. So he's obviously a freak. You wonder what would happen if you gave the microscope to a woman first instead of this guy. But he wound up with his semen on a microscope. They found some crystalline structure in it. It didn't get named for another 200 years. But it wasn't until the 1980s and 90s that with research coming through the cancer community, figuring some things out there, and then finally with the understanding of autophagy, we really start to see the role of spermidine in our bodies. And it's clear at this point that it's an autophagy trigger and part of the autophagy mechanism. It's a critical step. So if you're fasting, your fasting creates autophagy better with spermidine on board than without. If you're not fasting, and remember, autophagy is not an on-off process. It upregulates and it downregulates. So with spermidine on board, even the low levels of autophagy are higher. And the things that you do, whether it's exercise or heat or any of the autophagy triggers, all become more effective with spermidine on board.
Yeah. It really is. And autophagy is just so incredible. We did, my wife did another one of the Prolon 5-day fasts recently, alongside the Spermidine that she's been taking. I was saying Spermidine there. Is it would you say Spermidine or Spermidine?
Tomato.
Okay, cool. And she looks, I mean, I notice it maybe more in her than in me, but her skin is just, I mean, it's just, it looks, I thought, have you been off for some Botox or something? She hadn't. She'd just been doing a fast and taking Spermidine.
Well, and if there's a really good review article in Cell called Spermidine in Health and Disease. And one of the things you see is with autophagy from Spermidine, you see an upregulation of epithelial stem cells. So there's an upregulation of the cells that make your skin, that become your nails, that become your hair. And as you upregulate, as you raise spermidine levels, you upregulate those stem cells and you get great skin and nails. And that the thing that people remark on the most when they use our product is their fingernails start growing like crazy. My brother says we got to sell a razor with it for men because you got to shave your back more often. It's that it's that hair growth that comes with that people really notice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I went down a huge rabbit hole before this interview, just sort of researching and listening to a couple of podcasts that you've already recorded. There's a lot of research currently going on with Spermidine, isn't there? But not that much previously.
Well, here's your challenge. I mean, they just awarded a Nobel in 2016 on to the guy that described the autophagy process. Okay, so we're really sitting on cutting edge stuff right now. Then Dr. Frank Medeo, one of the founders of spermidineLIFE, Longevity Labs, his work looking at spermidine in senescent cells is really groundbreaking. So, it took Frank to be able to get the information started. And now we've got some great research going on around the world, looking at cognition, looking at immunity, looking at a lot of these elements that are associated with autophagy.
Yeah, it's amazing. And my audience first heard about autophagy and about Spermidine from David Sinclair, who we had on the podcast. I know you guys are involved with him as well. And yeah, it's just sort of an area that it does seem to be so cutting edge. But what is your hope, firstly, for the company and the product, but also what do you hope from taking it yourself? You know, you said your daughter just graduated, so I think that gives away that you're a certain age. Where do you hope your own longevity will go?
Well, yeah, and listen, I turned 60 this summer on my last birthday. And when I do a lecture where I talk about the 3/3 of your life, and the fact that you spend the first third of your life learning, you're in school, growing up, doing those things. You spend the second third of your life, Tony, you're in second third, you're in service to others. You're raising a family, you're doing work. My daughter moved out of our house. My wife and I were only blessed with one child. She moved out the beginning of this year, and I'm starting my third. Okay, so it's our third. My wife and I. This is our time. So there's two things I want to get out of it. Tony, I've had the chance to coach amazing people in my career. Olympic medalists, national champions, All-Americans. I've worked with some phenomenal athletes. Had the privilege of doing so. The greatest coaching experience I've ever had was working with my daughter's 8th grade field hockey team. Wow. I would trade it all to be able to do that again. I want to coach my grandkids and my great grandkids. And I, almost 4 years ago, my nephew had qualified for the Florida State Wrestling Championships. So he was getting ready to go wrestle in the state championships. And my background, I wrestled for, that was my sport. And I did pretty good. I was pretty good. But, this is now 30 years after my last wrestling match. And I got to go down and work out with him. I did pretty good. I mean, I still had a lot in my game for one day. Second day, I was a mess. But the first day, I still had it. I want to be the crazy uncle that showed up at 80 years old and can work out with people. So my longevity goals, besides enjoying this trip we're on and getting the most out of, life with my wife and all that we do, I want to physically be able to compete. If just in coaching, those are the kind of physical things I want to do. And, it's a challenge, you take some hits along. I've had 80 surgeries.
Did you say 80 surgeries?
8. Yeah.
Eight
More
surgeries.
than 7, less than 9. 8.
Okay, 8.
Yeah.
So because your background is obviously, you talked about the athletics coaching. Is it wrestlers that you've been coaching?
Well, I've had a chance to work with lots of sports, but my focus has been wrestling.
Okay.
In 2015 through 18, I was a sports scientist with the wrestling team at Ohio State.
Wow.
And we did so this is where I learned so much about heart rate variability. I mean, we got to where we could use HRV to prescribe, to predict, to select. We used it. It's a phenomenal device in elite athletes.
Wow. I saw you wearing an Oura ring there as well.
Yeah, I've got my Oura ring on.
Yeah.
And from time to time in the house that we sold, I had a credenza that probably had 50 different heart rate devices in it that I was testing. I mean, I used to work for Polar, so that started the addiction.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I love wearable technology. I love good wearable technology. And, this is just the space and HRV and longevity, those things are going hand in hand.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah. Yeah. I've found it absolutely fascinating tracking my HRV, and both illuminating when I find patterns and trends, and also deeply frustrating when I see trends and I can't work out what the pattern is.
Well, listen, signal and noise, there's a lot that goes on there. And what's really interesting is time that we live in. With the wrestling team that I was working with, the last years I was there, we measured 3.5 million data points on a wrestling team in one season.
Wow.
So we were collecting lots of heart rate variability data. We measured everything. And it's only when you put time into analyzing signal and noise, in sport and fitness and a lot of the things we do, there's a lot of dogma. There's a lot of bullshit out there, but it's bullshit that gets reinforced with dopamine because people keep taking it to the edge, and they keep blistering themselves.
Yeah.
But until you start to look at recovery, remember, growth doesn't come from work. Growth comes from recovery. So you need work, recovery, then you get growth. And this is, unless you're measuring it, it's hard from time to time.
Yeah. Interrupting this chat with Don for one moment to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by Don's company, SpermidineLIFE. And if you want to use the code Tony20, you will get 20% off all SpermidineLIFE and Essentials products. So go to spermidineLIFE.us and use the code Tony20. That's it really, because you've already heard about how good Spermidine is and what a fan I am, and my family as well. And now you can go to spermidineLIFE.us and use the code Tony20. Back to the show, back to Don. I know a lot of people who wear an Oura ring who are fairly obsessed, or not just an Oura ring, but just track their heart rate variability in general. And they're fairly obsessed with improving their scores. And they will be pricking up their ears right now. Do you think that Spermidine is something that does help with HRV?
We've actually seen some interesting data on this. So we don't have a clinical human study on this, but some of the feedback we're getting from our clients is a definite impact on HRV. So you know what? It makes sense. If the body is not in autophagy, you're beginning to stress the cells. You're going to start to get a sympathetic signal from that. Whereas if you're able to boost autophagy and you're doing those things, if you're exercising, if you're getting sleep, if you're getting the key things that you need to drive that even fasting. Now, listen, I think from time to time, we can fast heavy enough that it becomes a sympathetic stress.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Once you get the routine and you're feeding correctly and you're solid, you should see a rise in HRV, certainly an improvement in sleep. And this is one of the things we're working on too in this country. Unfortunately, we're working on a cannabis-based solution for an HRV product which, you start messing with cannabis and there's lots of issues that go with it, but it works. I mean, it hits the endocannabinoid system, which is part of the HRV process. So these are all things we're looking at, but to go back and answer your original question, yes, we're getting a lot of feedback from people that spermidine supplementation is impacting their HRV.
Mm-hmm. So one of the areas that I really went down was looking at some of the scientific research. And as we've said, there is a lot of science and there's a lot more in the pipeline. And one of the areas I'm fascinated by is some of the very early emerging studies around autophagy and sleep and spermidine. And that seems like an area that, I mean, anecdotally, everyone I speak to who's tried spermidine says, and we found that as well. I mean, it really does help with sleep.
The lucid dreaming is great, isn't it?
Right. Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe I have noticed that, but I just hadn't linked it to spermidine. Yeah. So tell us a bit more about sleep and spermidine.
This was my favorite. Again, I'm going back to, listen, I don't think scientists can tell you why you dream or how you change it, but certainly that's some of the other feedback we get is deep lucid dreaming. We also see an increase in some deep sleep. Again, this is all anecdotal. We have not put this in a human study yet that we're looking at. But when we but with customer feedback, that lucid dreaming, and I experienced this too. And, I kind of like a good night of good dreams and deep sleep. So we've gotten a lot of good feedback on that.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I had some crazy dreams last night and I've only just remembered. So maybe it was the spermidine.
Listen, good. There's a lot of, but it's homeostasis. Give all of your systems, your central nervous system, your brain, giving all of your systems a chance to reset, to clean, to do the things they need to do. That's everything that we do in human performance and medicine should be about restoring homeostasis. Yeah. And you can't do that without solid autophagy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I think I'm so pleased that we're partnering up, because I do think that it's sort of like an ultimate biohack. And you are clearly someone who is, to me, biohacking is, it's using the red light panels and the sauna, but I love all the tracking. And, you talk about collecting those data points, and I was salivating with excitement. I mean, I sort of want to know how you're analyzing all the data. That's the thing that really gets me excited. And I think that spermidine ties in really well with that.
Well, and Tony, I think, listen, I'm an N of one, and you've got to be able to manage your own data. And university research is all about standardizing your study population so you can measure the impact of the molecule or whatever you're working on. And there's this, listen, you and I, while we're both humans, we do have DNA deviations, which makes you look like you and me look like me, and the different, just makes which is a beautiful thing. When we do a university research study, we find the mean, we find how things move from the mean, but someone may be on the edge of the spectrum, and that's why you've got to be able to handle N of one. Okay, that there's some people that respond well to running, not me. I respond well to picking up heavy stuff. So you've got to figure that out. And this is the value of some of these great wearables and the data that goes with it, particularly the emergence of the sleep quality studies. I distinctly remember a decade ago that preserving sleep was frowned upon. Work late, get up early, go hard, well, we're learning now that's a mistake. We were working with the U.S. Special Operations groups, and we saw a study where they had these groups go without sleep and self-rate themselves. And the guys that went without sleep rated themselves of doing very well, but their supervisors watching them, their performance continually degraded over time to where there's a huge differentiation between the observation and the individual. You can't tell when you're doing badly on bad sleep. It just doesn't show up. But we know that sleep's critical. And again, restoration of homeostasis through exercise, through good food, through quality sleep, through good light, and And then, I call those my 4 rocks of longevity: movement, nutrient density, good sleep, and good light. And those go into the jar of a purpose. Why, there's lots of natural pressure against us to not move and not exercise. There's pressure to eat bad food. There's a lot of environmental pressure affecting your sleep. And, we've scared everybody to death of the sun because of the risk of skin cancer. So no one's going out and getting light. And my point is, listen, when I've got melanin, I'm happy. I don't want to burn, but I do want light. And in the absence of purpose, a lot of those 4 rocks can get degraded. And spermidine is just not a nutrition rock. It's an essential element. We're starting to find out. It's like a vitamin. And so it's just one of those things you get into your stack.
Yeah. Fantastic. So we've covered some of the science and sleep and autophagy. I know that there's a tiny bit of gluten in spermidine, which some people avoid, but actually for many people, it sort of seems to be okay, even if they do tend to avoid gluten normally.
We have full-on celiac patients using our product now. But on the other hand, I'll tell you, we do get reports from time to time that there's people that just don't tolerate. Now, they don't get the full celiac response, but they'll get bloaty. Now, we have people that manage that. To be considered gluten-free, you got to be below 20 parts per million. So if you take a spermidine tablet and you break it up into a shake and spin it up a little bit, you're well below 20 parts per million on that point. So there is a celiac association says you want to keep your gluten intake if you have celiac below 10 to 50 milligrams a day, whereas a piece of bread I think has 3,500 milligrams. spermidineLIFE has 1. So that it's all about perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you were obviously hanging out with Dave Asprey last weekend. One of the times that I chatted to him, we spoke the whole podcast we recorded about how he wants to live to 180. Is that something that's possible with spermidine?
Wow, I don't listen. I've talked about this a lot. If you want to get to 180, your challenge is getting through 70 to 90. Okay, that's the challenge, and because listen, if you want to live forever, you got to figure out what's going to kill you. And if you play in traffic every day, diet's not important. You got to fix the traffic thing first. If you play in traffic every day, autophagy is not an issue. You got to fix your immediate threats. So stop playing in traffic, number 1. Number 2 is if you want to get through 60, 70, 80, 90 years old, the thing that will kill you there are heart disease, cancer, poor immune response, poor neural response. All of those conditions are improved with autophagy. All of those conditions. And we know spermidine levels decline with age. We know that. The data is very clear. And people who live well into their 80s, 90s, and 100s have high spermidine level diets. This is where blue zones come into play.
Yeah.
So if you live in a place where you purchase your food at a store, you have a challenge because that food has been raised mechanically. It's been raised to produce volume, not necessarily nutrient density. And you have to think about the hack there. Okay, how do I hack the nutrients back into that food source? If you grow your own food, if you have your own gardens, you know what? That's what blue zone people do. They largely grow their own food. It's nutrient dense. It's not mass produced. And so, this is a challenge. I in one of my talks, I talked about the first biohacking was when we were packing sailors onto boats in the 16 and 1700s and sending them across the Atlantic or around the world. Well, this is where we started to see vitamin C deficiency. Okay. The sailors that ate the rats on the boat did not get scurvy because rats produce their own vitamin C.
Right.
The sailors that did not eat the rats, they wound up having to pack limes and citrus fruit to get the vitamin C. So these are the first biohacks.
Yeah.
Well, we've now worked our way down the line to where we see spermidine is one of those nutrients that falls out with industrial food production. We extract ours from wheat germ raised in Central Europe, much different laws than with North America. And, if you consume like the fermented soy, like natto, good for you, because I can't choke that stuff down.
No.
So it's about getting the stack in that you need of those essential nutrients. And Spermidine looks like it's one of those.
Yeah. So what is, final questions, what is one book that you would recommend, Don? And what is one tip for living with more energy and vitality?
Okay, so the one book, thinking about this, I'll tell you, there's a couple of them. I think the most important book I've ever read is called Flow, The Psychology of the Optimum Experience. It's by a researcher out of University of Chicago. His name was Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I can't spell it. Flow, the psychology. It is, when you're in the zone, when you're in the groove, when everything's working. So Csikszentmihalyi was able to describe the 7 characteristics that go with it. And if you don't enjoy what you're doing, you won't do it. Okay? This is important. So flow is really important. And all the books that have come from that, Stephen Kotler's work has been really good. So again, I consider the most important book I've ever read, Flow, The Psychology of the Optimum Experience. It's really shaped what I do.
Fantastic. I've delved into a bit of Stephen Kotler's stuff and love reading about flow. So I'm gonna look that one out. And then what about one tip then?
So one tip for energy, listen, more light. Learning to manage your light is the hidden, listen, I'm in this rig. I've got a big TV here. I've got a computer screen here. In my rig, I've got a TV out there. I've got a 55-inch TV that pulls out of the bottom of this thing so we can watch football outside. We have a lot of things that create light, dirty light, and clean light. Starting to figure that out. First thing when I got up this morning, I went outside. I took my dog for a walk outside. I made sure and got to where I could see the horizon where the sun was coming up off it. Setting that circadian rhythm is so important for energy. It's so important. And I think this is where I go to when I think about where. Now, listen, you got to throw in the nicotinamides and what's going on in electron transport. But if that's missing, you got to fix that. Yeah. But managing light, we've talked about sleep. Everyone, we've known for exercise. We've known about exercise for years. You just have to have a reason. You have to have a reason to get out there, and you have to engage. But I think the thing that we can listen. That's why this thing's hanging over my shoulder. Light is important, and I think planning it is one of the biggest tools for synchronizing energy.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Don, really great to talk to you. Love what you guys are doing. The code Tony20, I'm going to go through the discount codes at the end, but the code Tony20 gets 20% off. And just think it's really exciting. It's like, if you're into biohacking, if you're into longevity, but I think there's an immediate benefit as well, as we talked about with the hair, the skin and the nails as well. It's great what you're doing. So thanks for everything.
Listen, it's our pleasure. And my goal is for biohacking to not be a crazy fringe. At some point in time, everyone has got to look at their own environment and say, how do I modify my environment to fit my DNA so I don't spend the end of my life in a hospital bed hooked to tubes? That's the challenge. I don't know how long I'm going to live, but I want to be happy, dead. So I think that's part of what goes into it.
Yeah, that should be the name of the podcast. Good man, Don. Great to chat. Thanks for coming on Zestology.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
That is it. Thank you to Don, and thank you for listening as well. SpermidineLIFE is this show's podcast partner as well. So you can use the code Tony20 if you go to spermidineLIFE.us. That's Tony20 if you go to spermidineLIFE.us. At the time of recording this, that discount was not available in the UK. But by the time this goes out, it might be as well. Okay, so there's a different site for EU and UK, and try Tony 20 there as well. I know they're working on it. If not, you're gonna have to pay full price, which is worth it anyway, honest. But otherwise, you can use the code Tony20 at checkout to get 20% off all SpermidineLIFE products. SpermidineLIFE.us. Thanks for listening. Next week, Sassy Sober Mum. I'm so looking forward to this podcast. That's coming next week on Zestology.